Okay, Erev Tov, everybody. On behalf of Torah Motion, warm welcome to Parshat Tazria Umetzora. And a pleasure to welcome back Rabbi Eitan Aviner, who I think for Yom Ha'atzmaut, Lechavod Yom Ha'atzmaut, we had to have someone who's living in Israel and is here in Canada on Shlichut, teaching in the Bnei Akiva schools. He is a graduate of Machon Lev with a degree in engineering. I believe now he's working on a master's in halacha and at Bar Ilan University. And he's a Rabbi got smicha from YU and the chief rabbinate of Israel. And it's a pleasure to welcome him to enlighten us on Tazria Umetzora. Vakasha, Rabbi Aviner.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi Kelman. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Okay, the Metzora, lessons for a COVID world. It's been a complicated year. I think everyone would agree to that. And I think it's been a year of introspection for all of us as individuals, as communities, even on a global level. We've all needed introspection. And I think out of all of the parshiot, Tazria Metzora probably has much to teach us about what it means to live in a COVID world. I have a newfound appreciation for this parsha, these parshiot, than I had in past years. It's usually one of those parshiot you just try to go through, not much application to your life, but I think in 2021, there's definitely what to learn from it. So just a little bit about the Metzora. So the Metzora is some type of skin affliction, ailment. The Mefarshim explained that we're not talking about an actual physical cause, some type of, it's not leprosy as it's sometimes translated as. So I'm going to use the word Metzora. Rav Hirsch and others point out that we can see from the Pesukim that we're not talking about something of physical disease, but something of spiritual nature. From the very fact that when the person gets it, they go to a Kohen. They run to the Kohen, they say, hey, Kohen, what do I got? I got this on my arm. What am I supposed to do? And then the Kohen deals with him. The Torah is not against going to the doctors. You should go to a doctor. You should listen to the doctors, and you should be healed. Yet here the Torah tells us to go to the Kohen. So we're talking about something of spiritual nature. The causes of it, the spiritual causes of it, we'll talk about a little later on. But that's what we're dealing with. And therefore, one might argue that, well, there is no real comparison between the Metzora, Tzarat, and COVID. COVID, we're dealing with a virus. Now, you might have some Rabbanim who are putting up Pashkevilim that are telling us COVID are really from X, Y, and Z, and we have to mitakin this and that and the other. But at the end of the day, it's a virus, and that's how we're treating it in terms of fighting it. Nonetheless, we do see poskim who do learn out from Metzora, different halachos of how to relate to pandemics. I think a very interesting one from Rav Chaim Palachi, who lived in Turkey. He lived in Turkey in the 18th century, and he was actually dealing with a pandemic. I'm not a history buff, but I try to look it up a little bit, and I think they were dealing with cholera. In Eastern Europe in the mid 1800s, they had an outbreak there. In any case, so there was an epidemic going on where he lived in Turkey, and the following question was asked him in source number 1. Neshalti odot beit knesset echad sheyesh bo chaver shehu rofeh v'ata hu zman magefa bar minan. There was the board of the shul came and they asked him the following question. That one of the members, he was a doctor, an infectious disease specialist, if you will. And it was the time of a magefa that was going on. There was a magefa, there was an epidemic. And he worked in the ward. He worked in the COVID ward. And he wants to come to shul. He wants to come, he's got his seat. He wants to get an aliyah. He wants to be just like he was in the past. And there's a protest. The rest of the members of the shul don't want to allow him in. They're afraid that maybe he's contagious. He works and he's surrounding himself with these individuals who are sick. Maybe he will go ahead and he will infect them. The Hutoen, the doctor, claims, this is my shul, I pay my dues, I get my seat, you can't tell me not to come. If you don't want to come to shul because you're scared of getting sick, so you stay home, but you can't stop me from coming to my shul. So that's the question that was asked to Rav Chaim Palachi. So here we have an interesting situation of where you have the rights of the individual. It is his seat, it's his shul, he should be allowed to come, versus the community. So how exactly do we balance this? So Rav Palachi, he brings from a Gemara, from a Tosfot in Bava Kama. The Gemara there is dealing with the following case. You have a yard, okay, and this guy has a fire pit in the yard with lots of coal. Unprotected, he doesn't have fences or anything like that. And the concern is that the neighbor has a dog. Right, so the Gemara says, well, if the dog comes in and he bites a coal and he takes it and he runs to somebody else's field and he starts a fire, so who's going to be responsible? Who's going to be responsible for the damages? Is it the guy who had the coal in his yard, or is it the owner of the dog who came running into the yard and stole the coal? So the Gemara says that absolutely it is the owner of the dog. It's his dog, right? The dog is the one that caused the damages. And so therefore, the owner of the dog would be responsible for pay for damages, and the owner of the dog is responsible to look out for the dog and make sure this doesn't happen. However, says the Gemara, that nonetheless, the owner of the yard that has the coal in it, he's still obligated to go ahead and put up a fence. He's still obligated to make some type of boundary, of border, of protection, so the dog doesn't come in, even though he wouldn't be responsible if damages happened. It's the owner of the dog that's going to be responsible. Yet the Gemara says that this man also has to put up a fence. So Tosfot there comments and says, in source number 2, Nir mikan ledaktek, the yoter yesh la'adam lizaher atzmo, shelo yazik acherim, mishelo yuzak. A person has to be more cautious that he shouldn't go ahead and take precautions, that he shouldn't go ahead and cause damages to somebody else, rather than himself getting damaged. He has, the Gemara says that he has some type of obligation to go ahead and put borders and protect the coal that's in his yard, even though the dog has no permission to come into his yard. And the owner of the dog has no permission to allow his dog to come in. The reason that the Gemara says you have to do this is so that it doesn't cause damage to other people. Since this person has what in his ability to stop the dog from coming in, we require him to go ahead and make those fences. Now, it's fascinating because, I'm sitting, I got a beautiful view, I'm looking out the mountains, and now the Gemara comes along and says, hey, buddy, you got to put up a fence. What do you mean I got to put up a fence? I made my yard here. I built this house because I got a beautiful view of the Judean hills. And now you're going to go ahead and tell me I have to put up a fence because of this guy's dog? We have a case in which a person's own rights are being minimized in light of his responsibilities to the community. But at the end of the day, Tosfot says, based on this Gemara, yeah, that's it. A person has an obligation towards his communal responsibilities, and that can overshadow his individual rights. Rav Chaim Palachi, he also brings proof from the Metzora. So the Mishnah Maseches Nagaim, which is talking about a lot of the dinim of the Metzora, says as such. Some background to this. The Metzora, besides for having this affliction, the skin affliction, he's also metame. He can also go ahead and he can defile other people. He can cause them to become spiritually impure. People, objects, all of these things. In fact, the Metzora has an extremely high level of impurity. He's on the level of tamei meis, as impure as a dead person, which is pretty incredible because that's the highest level you have, and there's nothing that high other than dead people and the Metzora. So it's pretty severe. It's pretty intense. So the Mishnah says as such: Metzora shenichnas lebeit hakneset let's say this Mitzora, he wants to come to shul. He wants to come to shul, kind of like the original case. So the Mishnah says, no, it's fine, you can let him into shul. However, osim lo mechitza gvoa asarat tfachim arochav arba amot nichnas rishon v'yotze acharon. You go ahead. You have to he has got to have his own little area. He's got to have his own little cubicle, right? 6 feet distance, 2 meters. He's got to keep distance from people, and also he enters first, and he leaves last. Distance from people. So there shouldn't be congregation. There shouldn't be people talking. Ravadia Bar Tanura explains, commentary on the Mishnah, why the chashinan shema ya'amod me'at b'shat shehu over. Maybe they're going to congregate. We told everybody, don't stay in shul, please leave immediately. But maybe if they're all going through the same exit at the same time, people are going to stop and talk. And he's going to go in and he's going to spiritually defile everybody that's there. So here we see another example in which the Mitzora, the Rabbanan come along, this is a rabbinic restriction, they come along and they say, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put restrictions in order to protect the community, in order to protect everybody else. And this puts refrain on him. He's now allowed to go ahead now and communicate and surround himself and congregate with everybody else. Based on that, Rav Chaim Palagi in his tshuva, in his response, paskin that absolutely the Beit Knesset, the shul, can go ahead and bar this person, this doctor. He's not even sick, but they're concerned that he might be sick. They can bar him from coming into the shul. Even though he's a member, even though the Rushiti or the Makomi Aniba, he's claiming that he has a right to be there, he does have a right to be there. But there's a communal responsibility to protect the well-being of everybody else. And therefore, he paskin that they had a right to bar him. I'm going to try not to apply this too much outright to our modern things. I know Torah in Motion is all over the world, and in different communities there are different social norms. In Israel, starting I believe on Sunday, you can walk around without a mask. Right? So some places are returning to reality, some places are still stuck in lockdown, and some places are just ignoring that there ever was a pandemic and continuing life as normal. But I think what this part of the sugya tells us is that yeah, we do have rights, but you know what? We also have responsibilities to community. And as a community, we need to make sure that we're watching out for each other. As a community, we need to make sure that our schools, our shuls, and our workplaces are safe. Which brings us to our next topic, medical screening. Is it anyone's business how I'm feeling this morning? I have to take a medical screening everywhere I go. If I want to go shopping, if I want to go to work, if I want to go to shul, I'm pretty soon my wife is going to be asking me before I come home, hey, have you a sore throat? So is anyone's business how I'm feeling? So perhaps yeah. The pasuk says in this week's parsha, "V'atzaru asher bo hanega bigadav yu prumim v'rosho yeh parua v'al saf'am ya'atev tamei yikara." As for a person with this tzarat, again, it's not leprosy, but this tzarat, his clothing shall be rent, his head shall be left bare. He should cover his upper lip, and he should call out, "Unclean, unclean." Tamei yikara. He should go ahead and he has to, with like a bell, screaming to everybody, "I am not clean. I am tamei. I defile people." That's pretty radical. So the Gemara learns out from this that we actually have an obligation in other respects as well. The Gemara says, and this is Maseches Moed Katan, mitzayin et hakvarot. You have to go ahead and you have to put markers at grave places. You have to show off where a cemetery is. If somebody is buried there, if it's a place, as we mentioned, a kever, a dead person can defile. So you have to go ahead and show where the kever is. Here it's talking about it. That's why it's in Moed Katan. It's talking about people coming up for Aliyah Regel, and so they want to come to Yerushalayim. They want to partake in food that you need to be ritually pure for, so they can't become impure on the way, possibly going through a Beit Kfarat. So you have to go ahead and put markers on where cemeteries apply. It doesn't just apply for the 3 festivals; it also apply for Kohanim and anything in that regard. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Avo Amar Mehacha. How do I know that I have to go ahead? I have an obligation to go ahead and place markers on the cemetery, because the pasuk says v'tamei tamei yikra tuma karelo. You have to go ahead and call out that you are impure, that you're a mitzora. V'omered lo parush. V'chen amar Rabbi Uziel bar brother of Uziel Rava tuma karelo v'omered lo parush. A person, he has to go around telling people that he is tamei in order that they should go ahead and separate, that they should not become defiled. And it's an obligation on the person to go ahead and do that. He can't just walk around town and be like, well, it's nobody's business if I have a sore throat today. It's nobody's business if I have fever. I have an obligation to go ahead and tell people I'm tamei. I have an obligation to go ahead and stop people from becoming defiled, from becoming sick. A lot of this touches upon. In Israel, they now have the green cards that they're coming out with, that you're only allowed to go into certain places if you're vaccinated. Will this take foot in other places around the world? Is America? I think it might be unconstitutional in America. I'm not sure, but Israel is doing it. So the question is, does a government have the right to do that? Forgetting laws of the land, but in terms of letting people know, like, who might have the vaccine, who might not have the vaccine, who might be sick, who might not be sick. Okay. A third issue that comes up is that of prayer. When someone's sick or a relative is sick, they have this dilemma. Should I tell people, like, lo naim? It's not so comfortable that I'm going to go ahead and air our dirty laundry, so to speak, and let everybody know that a person's sick. It could be embarrassing. Maybe they don't want people to know. But the Gemara actually takes the same limud and expands it to the idea of prayer. So again, this next source is really a continuation of that Gemara of Tami Yikra. Originally the Gemara learned it out to talk about that you have to go ahead and tell people that if you're impure. But the Gemara goes on and it says, "Bahalahachi hu da'ate." Is this really what that verse comes to tell me? It's coming to tell me that I have to go ahead and tell people. It's coming to tell me that I have to go tell people that I'm tamei. Isn't it come to tell me this other breita? V'tamei tamei yikra. Sarich lahodia tsaro le'rabim. I have to go ahead and tell people my own distress. I have to let it out to the rabbim, to the multitudes. The rabbim mevakshim alav rachamim, and then everybody else is going to go ahead and they're going to go ahead and daven and ask for mercy from heaven. Right. So which is it? Is tamei yikra? Is it talking about I have to tell people that I'm tamei so that they stay away from me, that I'm sick, spiritually sick, or is it to tell me that I have to go ahead and let people know the rabbim of my tzarot, so they're going to go ahead and mevakshim alav rachamim? So the Gemara answers, Im kain lichtov v'tamei yikra. It should just say v'tamei yikra one time. Why does the Gemara say my v'tamei tamei? Why does it say twice tamei tamei? Shema'at minei tarti. The double language of the pasuk is coming to tell me both limudim. Both of them are true. I have to go ahead and let people know that I'm tamei, and not so that they're poresh, so that they distance themselves from me and don't become tamei, but also that they should go ahead and daven for me and ask for rachamim. And I guess a kind of a philosophical question to ask is, well, why do I need the rabbim to daven? Why can't a person just daven for himself? Right? Why do we need vakshin alav rachamim? Isn't a person's most deepest connection straight to God? So we have a similar idea in the Gemara in Shabbat. The Gemara there is discussing whether I'm allowed to go ahead and do some type of healing method which doesn't necessarily have any medical substance to it. There haven't been peer-reviewed studies on it. It's kind of like, well, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. So the Gemara wants to know, is there a problem of Mishum Darchei Amori? Is there a problem of going like the ways of the idolaters, of thinking that has to do with some type of not based on substantial science? So the Gemara says, "V'hatanya ilan shemashir perotav, sokro v'tzoveh oto b'sikra v'ta'ono ba'avanim." Let's say you have a person who has a fruit tree, and the fruit tree seems to be, there's some type of problem with it. It's sick or something, and it's bearing its fruit, it's shedding its fruit prematurely. So what should one do? So the Braita says that you should go ahead and you should paint on it, you should color it red, and load it with stones. Place a lot of stones on top of it. So the Gemara says as such, Bishlama ta'ano ba'avanim. I understand why the Braita should go ahead and tell me that I should load it with stones. Why? Because this actually, this actually benefits. There's a scientific benefit, at least in the time of the Gemara or of the Braita, that this will it will strengthen the tree, and it'll heal it with its fruits. Ella sokro bisikra my refuah ka'avid. But why am I doing this weird thing of painting it red? It's kind of like superstitious in a sense. What's painting a tree red going to do? What kind of scientific background or support can you show me with painting the tree red? So the Gemara continues and it says, "Ki hechi delechuziu inashe v'debuyalai rachamei." Why are you painting it red? So that when people walk by, they're going to see the red tree, and then they're going to daven for you, right? They're going to go ahead and they're going to say, "Oh, this guy put a mark on his tree. That means there's a problem." Kiritanya v'tamei tamei yikra, as it says, he has to go ahead and call out that he is defiled. Sarich lo diat savro the rabbim. The rabbim yivakshu alav rachamim. And the rabbim are going to go ahead and daven for him. So just like a person they're going to daven for the person that he's sick, and that's why he has to go ahead and let them know. So too here also, if he lets the rabbim know that his tree is sick, they will daven for the tree. Here also again we see this idea of the rabbim, the multitudes going ahead and davening, and that's going to help. And what I want to argue is it's not just that. Somebody else is davening. He's going to go to his friend Joe and he's saying, "Joe, can you daven for me? You daven for me, I'll daven from you." Right? You hear all these like Hasidic stories where two people did a shidduch and they daven for each other and then they both get married, right? Something like that. It was a boy and girl, and they davened for each other and then they married each other. But I think that there's something more to it. I think that there's something special about the tefillah of the multitudes, not that just somebody else, but it's connecting to the tzibur. And there are many Gemaras which allude to this and brought down halacha l'mais in the Rambam. The Rambam says, "Tfilat hatzibor nishma'at tamid. Va'afilu hayu bahen chotem ein hakadosh baruch hu u'ma'is betfilatan shel rabbim." The communal prayer is always heard, even if there are transgressors, there are sinners amongst the congregation. God doesn't go ahead and just say, "Oh," He doesn't push away, He doesn't reject those prayers. Lefichach. Therefore, a person has to go ahead and he has to partake in the tefillah of the tzibor, to go ahead and connect with it. He shouldn't daven by himself if he actually has the ability to go daven with the tzibor. Not only is it proper to go ahead and connect with the tzibor, but a person should go ahead and have his tefillah. Where should they be? They should be in the place of the tzibur, the Beit Knesset. Okay. So the Rambam says that both you should be davening with the tzibur, or at least in the place of the tzibur. That there's a special power of the tzibur. But it's more than just that. We see from the Gemara in Brachos, fascinating story. If you think it was just, I'm talking to myself now, just me that misses Tefillah B'tzibor, it's not true. Here you have Amoraim that also miss Tefillah B'tzibor. Check out the story. Amar le Rabbi Yitzchak le Rav Nachman. Rabbi Yitzchak goes to Rav Nachman. My tamalo ate mar lebeit kinishta litzluye. Rabbi Yitzchak asked Rav Nachman, he says, hey, I noticed you weren't in shul today. What's that about? You missed, you slept in, you pressed snooze a little too much? So Amar le, lo yachlina. No, I couldn't make it, sorry. Amar le, lekanfe lemar, asar letzili. You couldn't make it to shul, you weren't feeling well, you had a sprained ankle or something like that. So gather 10 people to where you're at. Amar le, tirchali lemilta. No, I'm gonna gather a backyard minion now in my backyard. It's crazy, it's too much. It's too much. So why don't you send somebody, a messenger, he'll go and he'll come and tell you when the tzibor is davening. Right? If you didn't get the weekly bulletin, so he'll come and he'll tell you when everyone's davening. And then you can daven at the same time from your house. Isn't that a great idea, says Rabbi Yitzchak to Rav Nachman? Rav Nachman scratches his head and he says, Amar lei, my kuli high, that's ridiculous. I'm davening myself. I don't have a tzibor. I'm not the Malcolm tzibor. So I have to someone has to come tell me when they're davening. B'shvil ma, for what? Amar lei, da Amar Rav Yochanan, no, don't knock it. Don't knock it if you haven't tried. Amar Rav Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, ma dechtiv va'ani tefillati lecha Hashem et ratzon. What does it mean when David HaMelech says that I am my tefillah in the time of ratzon, the time of desiring from Hashem? Imatai eight ratzon. When is this eight ratzon? Bisha'a shat tzibur mitpalim. It's at the time when the tzibur is davening. So from this Gemara, even if a person can't make it to shul for whatever reason, they can't get a backyard meeting going on, they should at least, says the Gemara, daven at the time that the tzibur is davening. Mincha is at 7:50. So wherever you are, 7:50 is going to be when I'm davening, because then I'm connecting with the tzibur. So the question is, well, what is this actually doing? What's this whole idea of connecting to the tzibur? Just having many people daven at once. But I think it's something much deeper. If we look at our own tefillah, the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei that we say, we actually pay attention to the words. It's all a tefillah of the tzibur. Rifa'enu, please heal us. Right? Baruch Aleinu, make it a good year for us. All of it is for us. It's not me, unless you're Hasidish and then your oohs become e's. But that was a joke. But it's always about us. Right? Sometimes when we daven, and I'm talking to myself here because I do this all the time, we're thinking about ourselves and our own needs when we daven. But that's not how the Anshe Knesset Gedola formulated the language of the text. They wanted you to have a communal perspective, the needs of everybody else. Because if we're only davening to ourselves, about ourselves, we're saying we're fa'inu, but we're thinking about ourselves, baruch aleinu, but we're thinking about ourselves, so then it's not a tefillah of the tzibur, it's a tefillah of yourself, disguised. So this idea of a tefillah of the tzibur, I think it extends past just the idea of davening with people, davening in the same place as people davening, not even just davening at the same time as people davening, but our perspective on it, our approach to the tefillah itself should be on a communal level. And I've been struggling with this. We say Rafa'inu, and we all have our own lists that we add in. You hear a song that this sick person and that sick person, and then how do we end off that little paragraph in the middle of the bracha of Refuah? B'toch shar cholei Yisrael. So I've been having a little issue over the past year with that ending, and we've come to a level where our sense of community is not just our little village in Poland, and it's not even just our humongous community in Toronto of the tens of thousands, and it's not just even the Jewish community all across the world, but this pandemic has brought a sense of not just B'toch Shar Cholei Yisrael, but B'toch HaOlam. right? That it's a whole tzibor of, what are we at, 7 billion people, right? I have no idea, 7 billion people, where we all have this communal sense of we all need something. And that's the type of tzibor we need. We need a tzibor of not 16 million, but of 7 billion, and to have that type of perspective. I think the most interesting question is, Bezrat Hashem, what happens the day after, right? COVID has radically changed our lives. And I don't just mean that it's changed our lives in terms of what's going on right now, because that's obvious, all right? Right now, we're all in our own places dealing with our own restrictions and lockdowns and kids at home, but it's changed the way that we just function. You know, I see this with you see this with kids. I see this with my kids, that they grow up, and when a good percentage of their life is COVID and the restrictions of COVID. So how does that affect everything? The fact that my 1.5-year-old, when she goes to the door, she grabs a mask, you know, like, that's not natural. I mean, it is natural now in 2021, but that wasn't natural in 2019. Right? My kids today were playing, and then they had a nice game with sticks and like a little like thing that you stick the sticks in, and my daughter made a COVID molecule, kind of a COVID virus. Like that's what and antibodies. That's what's happening. So the question is, what happens the day after when we're saying, oh, you remember COVID, and we return to some type of normalcy, which is happening in some places. It's happening in Israel. Israel is, Baruch Hashem, on the forefront, and they're returning to some type of normalcy, and that Bezrat Hashem will happen in all of our communities. So how do we return to it? What are we supposed to learn and take from COVID? So there's an interesting Ramban. It's a gem of a Ramban. It's a one-liner, and the truth is, it's Yom Ha'atzmaut. We'll bring Geula to the Olam to say B'Shem Amro. I heard this idea from Rabbi Foreman. Actually, he pointed out this Ramban. The Ramban says that the dinim of the Mitzorah are actually quite similar to that of the Karban Pesach. It doesn't explain why or what that's supposed to mean, but if you look at the dinim of the Karban Pesach and the Mitzorah, of the purification of the Mitzorah, it's actually quite alarming. And the question is, well, why? What's that supposed to tell me? So, first of all, a couple things. Tzarat is called a nega tzarat, right? Adam kiya ba'or b'saro, se'et o sapachat o ba'heret, v'aya ba'or b'saro le'nega tzarat. He has some type of affliction of tzarat. Okay, but the thing is that nega doesn't really appear in the Tanakh that much, and in the 5 books of Moses in the Chumash, it only appears in 2 contexts. It appears, the word nega itself, just nega, appears by Mitzorah, and it appears in Shemot Yud Aleph. It appears by Makat Bechor. Vayamar Adonai Moshe, Od nega achat avi al Paro v'al Mitzrayim, acharei chen yishlach etchem mizeh, keshalach kala garesh etchem mizeh. God tells Moshe, I'm going to give one more nega. I'm going to hit Mitzrayim one more time with one more affliction. Referring to what? Referring to Makat Bechorot. In the purification process, so what does the Mitzorah have to do? So there are actually different stages in the Mitzorah process. There's the karbanot that he has to bring, and there's what happens to him itself. So the Torah says like this in Vayakra Perek Yudalid, Zot tia Torah HaMitzorah b'yom tarato v'uva el hakohen. On the day when it's time, the day after, now the Mitzorah wants to come and be purified, to say good riddance and get rid of his whole status of being a Mitzorah. It's a vaccine. He wants the vaccine. Vayatza hakohen el michutz lamachaneh v'ara hakohen denei nirpa negat tzarat min hatzorah. So first, the kohen has to do an examination. He has to go see. He has to make sure that there is no more tzarat on the person. B'tziva hakohen v'lakach limitaher shtei tziparim chayot tahorot ve'etz erez u'shnei tolat ve'ezov. So the kohen goes ahead, really weird procedure. He goes ahead and he takes these 2 birds, Okay, he takes these birds, and he takes cedar wood. He takes this like crimson red string and hyssop. Right, takes this erez, this plant, his hyssop branch. V'tziva kohen v'shachat et hatzipor achat el kli cheres ala mayim chayim. So he got the two birds, and he goes ahead and he slaughters one of the birds, and the blood goes into this pottery. Et hatzipor achaya, and then he takes the live bird, yikach oto, vet ha'etza erez, vet ha'shnei tolat, vet ha'ezov, taval oto, vet hatzipor achaya bedam, v'hatzipor shchota al mayim chayim. So what does the Kohen do? He takes the live bird and he dips it in the water, letting the blood run out into the water. Okay, so you got the blood in the water with the dead bird. Okay, and then in the blood, he goes ahead and he takes the wood, he takes the crimson string, and he takes the hyssop branch and he dips it in the blood. And then the Kohen goes ahead and he uses it and he sprinkles it on the person. Now, what Rabbi Foreman points out is there's a lot of parallels to what's going on with the Exodus, with Yetzias Mitzrayim. For instance, these two birds. You have two birds, look very similar. One is killed, and the other one, it goes out, is sent out alive. Right? That's the nega acharon, the last affliction that Hashem brings onto Mitzrayim. Right? You have makat bechorot. You have the bechor. Hashem refers to us, right? Ami bechori refers to Am Yisrael as his bechor. And he says, you took my bechor. Hashem says to Paro, you took my bechor, you afflicted them. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take your bechor. So on the night that the bechor of Mitzrayim die, the bechor of Hashem gets sent out, representing, in a sense, parallel to these two birds. Then there's the cedar wood and the hyssop, right? Putting blood on the wood and on this vegetation. What happened on the night of the Exodus? The night of the Korban Pesach? So they went ahead and they took blood from the carbon and they put it on the doorposts, on the wood of the doorposts, right? Representing parallel to our wood. And how did they go ahead? How did they go ahead and put it on the doorpost? So the pasuk says, "Velakachtem agudat ezov v'tvaltem b'dam asher basaf v'gatem el hamashkof ve'el shei hamezuzot min adam asher basaf v'atem lo tetzu ish mipetach beito ad boker." You got to go. Interesting. You have to go ahead and you have to take this hyssop branch and you have to dip it in the blood, and that's basically going to be your paintbrush to put it on the wood. So in both cases, you have two things that seem similar. One of them dying, one of them going free. You have the blood on the wood, and you have the hyssop branches. But it's more than that, because we go ahead and we take the Kohen takes the blood, he takes the bird that was shechted, and he puts it in the water. And the blood goes ahead and it spreads out to the water. Right? Representing what? This is the final makkah in Egypt of Kriyas Yamsuf. Right? The bechor that was going to go ahead and was slaughtered is now going into the water, and this is the end of it. Right? Another one, which in this last parallel, I'll be honest, I don't think is the strongest parallel, but I'll just say it to give credit to Rabbi Foreman, is of the 7 days. After the 7 days, after he goes ahead and he does it, so the Mitzorah has to go ahead. He leaves his tent and he stays outside for 7 days, similar to what we have by Korban Pesach. After the Korban Pesach, we're told about the whole Chag of Matzot, that you have to go ahead and get chametz out of your house for 7 days. So the question is what are these parallels supposed to mean? Why is this Mitzorah bringing kind of like a quasi Korban Pesach? If the Ramban is correct. So I think it has to do with what the Mitzorah is all about. How did the Mitzorah, why is the Mitzorah become a Mitzorah? So there are different Midrashim and different Gemaras that give different reasons, spiritual reasons, what may have caused the Tzarat. So we're most familiar with Lashon Hara, right? The Ramban, Rashi brings down in terms of the story of Miriam. Miriam is the only character possibly the only character who has a Tzarat, and she spoke Lashon Hara, and that's what the Rambam brings down at the end of Tara. But the other midrashim that bring different things, here's another one. There are 11 things that Tzarat will come, for idolatry, for causing desecration to God's name, for illicit relations, stealing, Lashon Hara. Here's the famous one for saying Lashon Hara, for going out and giving false testimony. For a judge who's unjust, who gives inappropriate din. Someone who takes a false oath in court. Somebody who goes ahead and he's just going to someone else's property. Somebody who's just deceitful. Someone who goes and creates quarrels and fights between his brothers. And those who say an evil eye. I think what a common denominator between many of these are, and what a lot of the other midrashim, which aren't brought here, point to, is that the Mitzorah, he was in a sense desecrating society. He wasn't a functioning member of society. He was tampering with it. Lashon Hara, he was breaking down what makes society function. Like Gila Arayos, the idea of having holy relationships and family units, he was breaking down. He was stealing. He's going ahead and he's saying Lashon Hara, causing fights between people. Eidu Sheker, if he's breaking the whole judicial system by giving false testimony, or he's a judge who's taking bribes and giving wrong cases, or Shvur Shav, he's making false oath. All of these is the breakdown of society. Right? This person, in a sense, is no longer a part of society. I'll just say this also, and Rabbi Foreman takes this point, that the Mitzorah, in a certain sense, he's like a dead person. When the Torah refers to Miriam, says you're going to make our daughter, you're going to make Miriam, our sister, like Kemet, she's going to be like a dead person. Even the color of the skin, the Torah becomes white like a dead person. So the argument is that the Mitzorah, in a certain sense, there's something dead about the person. It's the communal aspect of that person is dead. He's just become an individual. And there is no communal you. You've disconnected yourself from society. You're not a member of society anymore. You have no regard for society. You're just doing whatever comes your way. So what does the person have to do? He has to leave society. He has to leave the encampment for 7 days. You leave society. And then you're going to be reintroduced to society. Don't need the sheet anymore. Then you're going to be reintroduced to society. How are you introduced to society? That comes the whole process, the Torah process of the Mitzorah, which is parallel to what? Parallel to Korban Pesach. What was the Korban Pesach? The Korban Pesach was the first korban that we did as a community. Beforehand, we weren't a community. We weren't a nation. We were a family, a really, really big family, lots of kids, right? We were like a yeshuv, but we weren't a nation. Pesach is the birth of our nation. And the Korban Pesach is the act which brings us as a nation. You want to be part of this nation? So this is what you got to do. You got to go ahead and you got to slaughter the gods of Egypt. You got to put it on your doorpost saying, I have nothing to do with you. I'm part of the nation of Am Yisrael. Right? And that's what you got to do. The Korban Pesach represents us, our nationhood, us becoming a community together. That's what we did as families, units. We became a nation in Mitzrayim. The Mitzorah, now he's got to do the same thing on an individual level. He has died in a certain sense as the communal aspect of him. So now he's got to re-enter into the community. He's got to bring his own personal Korban Pesach with the two birds, with the cedar wood, with the blood and the hyssop branches, and all of that, and the 7 days and the sprinkling on him and dipping the blood into the water. He has to recreate the Korban Pesach for himself and say, okay, now you've just been in quarantine, come back to society. Let's see how you can function now in society. we've all gone through this process in a certain way, right? Whether you've actually been in quarantine, I myself have been in quarantine, locked away from my family for 2 weeks. We've all been disconnected. We're longing for community. We're longing for, that time, if there will be a time where I can give somebody a real handshake again, right? Just to have that type of interaction of community. I think we've come to a new level of understanding of what community is and how much we miss it, right? Like, when's the last time I gave somebody who wasn't my immediate family a hug, right? Like, I forgot what human skin feels like. We don't have that anymore. Basketball, just being able to play basketball with someone, shoot around, like, our kids are missing that. Right? We've lost community like the Mitzorah has lost his sense of community. He lost it because he didn't respect community. He cast it to the side and he says, I don't need community. I'm going to slander and I'm going to ruin the court system. It means no difference to me. Our community was taken away from us for whatever reason. And we've gone through this very long excommunication period where we put out, all of us have been put out. But there's going to be a day after where the Kohen's going to come to us and he's going to say, you know what? The Tzara'at is gone. We're ready to go ahead and be reinvited back into the community. All of us as individuals, as households, as separate communities, and we're going to come back and join as a community. The question is going to be, well, how are we going to treat the community then? Right? What's community going to look like? And I mean that on a global level, not just here, wherever our small communities are. I think the infrastructure of society has really asked itself that question. And you look at the political environment that's going on in America, look what's going on in Israel, all over the world. The whole infrastructure is saying, hey, let's reanalyze what we're really about, what holds us together, and what's really important, right? All these small things in our lives are like, is it really worth fighting? Or is the connection that we can have between each other, is that what's really about? So B'ezrat Hashem, as we learn this week about the Mitzorah, we should learn that there are lessons for COVID, that there will be a day after, there will be a day where the Kohen comes and he says, Yalla, back into society. I hope that day is sooner than later. And I hope that certain parts of the world, Canada specifically, catches up to other places so we can all have a little bit of sense of community once again. Rabbi Kelvin, thank you very much again for inviting me to speak.
Thank you. And I know I mentioned last year when you spoke, but I think there's a personal touch for Rabbi Aviner, a very personal touch. His father, unfortunately, passed away from COVID, really the beginning of COVID, Purim last year, and father passed away the week before Pesach. He did not even forget the way Shiva was, about the 2 days of Shiva, I think, and just as a personal touch, and we should whatever have come together for happy occasions. What can I say? But I know the year ended not so long ago of Eilut, and you should have many happy times. My problem is I'm not convinced we're going to learn very much from COVID, but that's a whole other discussion. Human nature, where people are itching to get back to their old ways and to forget about this. And I agree. Hopefully there's a lot of good that could potentially come out of it in terms of, I've written about this, speak about it all the time, how we treat essential workers and the gap between, the sort of the different elements of society and the racial aspects that come up and, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot we can do. And of course, how our shuls are going to act. And I don't even want to comment on that. I think I'll just say, if I may, it's, I teach a chat. Rabbi Eitan teaches at Orchaim. The schools are a mile apart, just over a mile apart. 2 high schools, one's a yeshiva high school and one's a community high school. Different, one's a co-ed community pluralistic high school, one's a modern Orthodox high school. But so we're teaching, and the kids had to interview people they're in front of the class. So I was interviewing a rabbi in the city, and basically, nobody knows what's going to be. None of the rabbis know. Nobody knows what's going to be with our shuls. Who's going to come back? How they're going to come back? Are they going to wait until we have Kiddush and shul to come back? Which I've heard already from a lot of people. Davening doesn't appeal to them. the tzibur, the yachid, some people like it b'yachidus to daven, and that's what we've discovered. And so I don't know. I don't know if you want to comment. If you have a few minutes, if anybody wants to comment on that, what should we do in our shuls? And I know this is not normally, you don't think of the Parsha Shir as a forum for this, but since this was a topic and Mitzvah does fit in very well, it's really what the theme of the Parsha is. What do we want to see different in our shuls? In their schools? I'll let you comment, please.
So, I mean, I'll talk about schools for a second. I know this is a discussion that I've had way before COVID. Your kid has a little runny nose. So do you send your kid to school? So if you asked me this in 2019, I'd say, of course. What kid doesn't have a runny nose in the summer? In the winter, especially in Toronto? Like, why don't I just say homeschool them? Like, what do you mean I'm not going to send my kid with a runny nose? But one thing that I think we've learned is that this winter we were in lockdown in Toronto, and I think it was like we went months without anyone in my house getting a cold, and it was quite amazing because people are being so careful, and I think it brings a certain sensitivity that there are a lot of people who have immune issues and they're immunodeficient, and they can't necessarily go into school normally or go into a workplace like regular people, and I think it's built a certain sensitivity that we've had towards them. That we have to be more conscious about how we are. Are we going to send our kids with a little runny nose to school? If I'm not feeling well today, should I go to work or take a sick day? This goes back to what my rights are and versus my responsibility to others. I do think that it's built a little sensitivity. How long that sensitivity will last, time will tell. In terms of shuls, it's interesting because when we first came back in Toronto to shul outside Minyanim, I think it was June.
June was the first time we had outdoor Minyanim last
June, right? From March 13th to June, and the excitement that I saw on people's faces when they came back, it was just a newfound appreciation. Just a couple of weeks ago, someone came to shul. He just got the vaccines, and I hadn't seen him since way before March. And he walked in, and it was just like I never seen someone so happy to step into a shul before, and that was a beautiful thing. I hope that the lessons of COVID stay with us. I do think that some people may not return, but time will tell. Time will tell.
I'm really more interested how how the davening is going to be affected. I've mentioned before, 2-hour davenings on Rosh Hashanah. Okay, maybe that's a little bit of an extreme, but for sure an hour and a half on Shabbos morning, people I think are not going to tolerate this. 2.25 hours that we daven on Shabbos morning. I mean, the laning, I go to backyard minyan, laning is 15 minutes. It's amazing. They just like Zoom. It's not Zoom, just no Misha Beirachs, no calling up people for aliyahs. It's just 1, 2, 3, and it's a pleasure,
Absolutely. You should know these 4-hour minyanim is a chutz la'aretz thing. In Israel, all minyanim are 1 hour and 20 minutes. That's just how they do it.
Right.
But again, Israel's leading the way. They did it with the COVID vaccines. They were doing it with minyanim as well. We have to learn from Israel. I think that's...
Yeah, but listen, even though the people can come back, lots of people have not come back. I mean, some people are excited to go to shul, but we all know. Look at even the shuls that were allowed to be open and minyanim and signing up. It's hard. And anyways, okay. Anybody have any comments or questions? I don't. Please let us know. We will post the sources. And Mitzora, this is like, I don't want to say it's the most like boring parsha of the Chumash, but I think if you took a survey, I remember Rav Schachter would often talk in Shir, it's a boring Gemara. Didn't mean he didn't learn it, know it off by heart. But we all know certain parts of the Torah are less exciting than others. What can we say? Mitzora is the cake, Tazria Mitzora. But it's interesting. We always do double parsha. We do that because we want to talk. We don't want to talk about Negaim a lot, but we always make Tazria Mitzora whenever we can, except in a leap year. It's always a double parsha. Whenever it's a not leap year, Tazria Mitzora is always a double parsha. And anyways, but even these obscure parshiot that we don't know what it's talking about, Se'er, Beheret, and Laban, like this and that, there's much to learn. And really, thank you, and thank you for the connection to the Korban Pesach, perhaps the most exciting part of the Torah in certain ways, or the forming of our nation. Anyways, thank you. Tomorrow morning, I'll be giving the Pirkei Avot shir at 9:30. Everybody's welcome. And then Sunday morning, Daniel Feldman, Rav Daniel Feldman, continuing his shir on human relations. I believe this week is Dan Lekav Zchut, judging people favorably. It's an important message we often need, and the parameters of that, when you can and need into, and et cetera, et cetera. And then that'll be followed by Rabbi Liebtag shir on Matan Torah, studying the Parsha leading up to Matan Torah. And then Monday, Rabbi Shvat will continue his series on Zionism, religious Zionism. And then Monday night, Dr. Shapiro will continue his letters with the Rabbanim. Tuesday morning, Or Wiskin on Chassidut, the founding of Chassidut, followed by Ilana Goldstein Sachs on Megillat Ruth. Wednesday, we have two new shiurim. Mari Lakshin will start a 10-part series on Midrash, Halacha, and Pshat. At 11 o'clock, the interaction where the Pshat and the Drush and the Parsha disagree with each other. He's always interesting, Dr. Lakshin. And then at 12:15, Lori Novak will be giving a 4-part series on women in Kriyat HaTorah. Look at the sources, everything from woman partnership, Minyanim, women aliyot, and Lori does it in such a clear manner to view the sources objectively. So those two shiurim are starting on Wednesday. Thursday, Shuli Mishkin will be back with her series at 11 a.m. Parsha Shir Pirkei Avot. So that's enough to keep you busy. It takes me 5 minutes just to announce the shiurim. So we invite a friend. Everybody be well, and want to wish everybody Shabbat Shalom, Laila Tov, and we hope to see you soon. Okay, and thank you, Rabbi Aviner. And okay, we'll look forward to seeing you on the streets of Toronto. We live just a few blocks apart, and we daven in the same shul when we daven in the same shul, which is not very often. I've been there for Mincha Mariv like 3 times in the last year. Sure, not even when I'm not in the backyard. But anyways, okay, Laila Tov, everybody. Thank you very much.